All right, we are now live on Facebook. Thank you out there. This is Quick to Politic. This is the social commentary web series and political talk show hosted by myself, your host, Ernestine Lyons. I am a councilwoman, entrepreneur, and I feel like I'm a big proponent of, just making sure that people know that they have agency when it comes to making a difference and, really being that force for change and that force for good in our own respective communities. So today we are being joined by a Councilman Mike Radtke, Michael Vincent Radtke, Vincent, right?
Junior, yeah. The whole name of Mount.
Junior. Yep. He serves on the Sterling Heights City Council, and Sterling Heights is the fourth largest city in Michigan. And so up until maybe the census might have it being, even bigger than that. But
yeah, we'll probably be the third once the census comes through. But we're currently waiting and seeing.
Right. Okay. Mike has served as the early part of his career working as a community organizer, public relations consultant, and a political activist. He's a small business owner of Wolverine Strategies, LLC, policy advisor, Renaissance man, the person that I go to with all of my questions that have to do with policy, and person who,
you don't know enough people.
all the advice. And so Michael also graduated with a bachelor's degree in history and political science from the University of Michigan, and earned a graduate degree in international and world history from Columbia University and the London School of Economics.
Yeah, they let me in. They're crazy.
Right. And he's also a lifelong traveler, has visited 27 countries, and has lived abroad in both Germany and the UK, of course. So we're going to be talking about pretty much pushing for greater inclusivity and conversations around that in the national narrative, and particularly in Michigan and Michigan politics, looking to have city governments be more accountable. We're also going to be talking about U.S. foreign policy, international relations, and then sort of the COVID spikes that have been happening and the politicization of mask wearing. So, and then feel free for all of you who are out there watching, feel free to put comments and questions, and then we can get those answered. So all your questions are welcome. So we're just gonna delve right into some of these questions here, and welcome. Thank you very much, Mike. And if you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself, like anything that I left out, we'd love to hear from you before we just dive right in.
No, I think you said the mouthful. It's I'm in my second term on the city council in Sterling Heights. That's okay. About it. You got everything else covered.
Yay. Okay, nice. So the first thing I want to kind of talk about is, with the current political climate, people are taken to the street. We're demanding, that there is more accountability in policing. We're demanding overall that we see a greater push for inclusivity in city governments, and that there was recently an incident where there was a vacancy on your zoning board of appeals in the city of Sterling Heights. And you questioned, the council when they were about to appoint yet another white male to this position. And if I'm not mistaken, it's only white males on the board.
So there's 7 positions and 6 of them are white men. That's not as important as just the point that I was encouraging diversity, because I feel like the current commission, and they do a great job, they are just not representative of the people that I see when I walk outside of my house as a councilman every day. 33% of our city is Chaldean, 51% of our city is female. There's no magic number here, or quota, or some kind of necessariness, except for the fact that I think that there are important voices that aren't in the room there, and I'm working my hardest to get them in the room so everyone's well represented.
Right. And so I think, the biggest thing here was, you were, pushing to have that inclusivity, and there was backlash in 2020, and from, folks who were saying that there was reverse discrimination at play here.
Yeah.
And, the city has, like, the city of Sterling Heights has a 2030 vision statement which is all about inclusivity. And, we need to bring diversity to the table. And, for this to kind of meet so much backlash from your fellow council folks. And, so tell me about your work towards greater inclusivity. And in this particular issue, just kind of like your feelings and your kind of need to push back, because this is the way that we need to have greater inclusivity. This is the way that we affect change, by having in some of these positions that maybe people don't know about. I know in Harper Woods, I constantly have to tell people about, our planning commission, our zoning commission, and all of these boards that, for a very long time were made up of the same types of people. And, it wasn't always as inclusive. So, in some ways, that's how you get that agency, is by appointing folks to serve on those smaller positions that aren't necessarily well paid and aren't as well known. But tell us a little bit more about what that struggle was like.
So I think we need to go back to the beginning on this. Yes. In Sterling Heights, in almost every city, there are 2 boards that are mandated by state law that you're required to have. This is the same in Harper Woods. We're required to have a planning commission, and you're required to have a zoning board of appeals. In Sterling Heights, the zoning board of appeals is made up of 7 members, and the planning commission is made up of 9 members. Now, that's great. But when you look at the actual representation on the boards, I've argued that there is not overt racism. There's just an insidious good old boys network that kind of operates in most cities. The people who are always around, they're always talking to people, they appoint their friends, and the pool kind of becomes completely made up of these people because they know the right levers, know who to talk to, and other folks, by accident, I don't even think it's purposeful, they get shut out of the process. Right. So in Sterling Heights, we have a 9-member planning commission. On that planning commission, we have 7 white men, 1 white woman, and 1 minority woman. And on our ZBA, we have 6 white men. One of them is foreign born, so that's great for diversity, but at the same time, they're all white men. And my argument is that in a city that is 51% female, the fact that we don't really have a woman in the room, I think her voice isn't being heard. I represent her, I represent everyone else in my city. But my point is that just because I represent her and I can attempt to understand what's going on, I can speak for her, but I can't really know her story or what's going on there. And I think having her voice in the room would add an important policy and just a viewpoint of the world that is being missed out right now. When this came about, I suffered just a tremendous backlash. Not tremendous, I think it's a minority of people who are loud on Facebook, like everything else, like Twitter. It's always a few loud people who seem to represent everyone, but don't represent anyone besides themselves. And I actually went into my local diner where I eat my food, Dodge Park, Coney Island, 15 Mile and Dodge Park, great restaurant in Sterling Heights. The owner's a personal friend of mine. And I was having my omelet and having my coffee the day after the meeting. And one of the waitresses came by and she was like, "Mike, watched that meeting last night. Wow, that was crazy." And I said, "Yeah, I never thought that pushing to have 1 woman on a committee would open me up to so much ridicule." And she looked at me and she said, "Mike, you've now experienced for like the last week what women experience every day in the United States. That we are essentially, we're always questioned our credentials. We never are given a shot. We're always told to shut up and wait our turn." And I look at this waitress and I said, "You know what? You're absolutely right." Mm-hmm. And I had never realized, and that's just a perfect example of how the viewpoint that I have is not the viewpoint of a female commissioner would bring. And I was just like, "You're absolutely right." And it stuck with me. This is what she experiences every day. And I'm not privy to that because I'm just a white guy in Sterling Heights. But I was shocked. I brought forward, to back up, the commission, the pool of candidates was very small. I think there was 2 people. And I said, I don't think this pool is representative of our city. So I asked for the process to be slowed down to get a further pool of candidates. And now we have a big pool. We have like 30 or 35 who have now applied because they watched on TV this meeting and they said, "Wow, that's not the city I know and love." But some members of council felt like, I'll say it, I was discriminating against the white guy. And I wasn't.
I personally watched, just the footage, and I was kind of a little surprised that this was all women telling you that you're discriminating against men for wanting to have diversity, and
the men were in support of diversity, and the women did not vote that way, and it was kind of shocking to me, frankly. Not to pick up the torch of women, but feminism, but I thought that I'd at least get one vote from our council, the majority female. And to have this disparity in our government, I think is shocking. And then to have them vote against it is also shocking. Mm-hmm. But to go even further, so, I brought this out, and there was a lot of it. I mean, it's not just that he is not a diverse candidate. I was supporting women or a diverse candidate because, 10% of our population, minimum, is African American. In a city of 133,000, that means we have 13,000 African Americans. And I think we got to have some representation for them. I think we need to have some representation for women. I mean, just fun fact, I pulled out the guide of the foundation of Sterling Heights today, when our city was first founded. And back in 1969, when our city started, we had 2 female planning commissioners. And here in 2019, 2020, 51 years later, we have 2 female planning commissioners. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. Exactly. Right. So I mean, I was surprised by the ridicule, but I know that the majority of people in Sterling Heights support my position. I put on my lip when I first ran for office. Sterling Heights is a city for everyone, old residents and new ones alike. Everyone has a place here. Everybody has something to contribute. And I also find it funny that so many of the people who are anti-diversity, now there's this big movement. I should resign, I guess, and help a minority get elected to my seat. That's their viewpoint, which means they fundamentally misunderstand how diversity works.
Right. The idea that somehow, was it Ypsilanti or somewhere where someone just resigned, as opposed to hearing differing perspectives. This is a time for people to listen, and I think this is a time to to question and have that moment of reflection. It's like, well, why are there only men? Why are there only this type of person in the room? Because decisions need to be made collectively when we're fighting for greater inclusivity and diversity. So
and that's the point. That's the point I was trying to make, is that the pool of candidates, it's my fault too. We're not getting enough of the candidates. And I think it comes down, I was a community organizer for years. And I learned one of the most important things you do as a community organizer is ask folks to help and support you. And that's sometimes, people just want to be asked. They don't know the process. They don't know the procedures. They're unsure of how everything works. So you have to go out there and you have to affirmatively say, will you help me? Will you volunteer? And if you ask, you're going to find tremendous people who want to do that. So we have to improve the pool. And I think the council now is going to move toward that way. We had a call where we discussed changes to the application that I think will better show which candidates want to be on which boards. Just me raising this issue and the backlash, we've had about 30 people apply for different positions in the city. So, and a diverse group. And folks are doing that. But I resent the idea that somehow I'm reverse discrimination isn't the thing, but I'm reverse discriminating against people. And I resent the fact that somehow I hate white people. Like, good luck. I think that I try to pick the best person for the job. But when I see such a stark disparity that I saw on our ZBA, I feel it's incumbent upon me to live up to my values and to try to make a change. And that's the hardest part. It's easy to say we're for diversity. It's easy to say we want diversity. Right. It's hard to make the change. Mm-hmm. So if you don't want to be a hypocrite, in my opinion, you have to then work toward diversity. I think this comes along with the idea of anti-racism, right? It's not enough to say, I'm not racist. You have to affirmatively say, I'm going to stop racism. I'm out there trying to stop that. And I think that's what we're really working toward. And I'll be honest, I was disheartened by some of the comments and conversation that was had in that meeting. I think my colleagues can speak for themselves, but I thought that it fundamentally missed the point, especially when we talk about cherry picking. This idea that somehow this gentleman, Mr. Hassinger, who declined the appointment after they appointed him, I lost the vote.
Wait, so he just dropped out? Okay.
He dropped out, he declined, yep. He declined to take the oath. That somehow, because I wasn't gonna vote for him, I was cherry picking a candidate. And what struck me was this idea that somehow the woman that I had found, I sought her out to she's already on one of our boards, to try to elevate the discussion. She's a female Muslim attorney who already serves on our Ordinance Board of Appeals. And I wanted to elevate her because it's the top two boards. People want to be on these boards. And she agreed. And the idea that somehow I'm cherry picking, that someone who's already serving our city, who is an accomplished female attorney, is not qualified, but some random retiree who likes to call up the city and complain is qualified. It just shows you there's no qualifications for certain types of people, and there's high bar for anyone else. And that's what befuddled me. And I think I spoke to our city planner about that at the meeting, that how did you make your recommendation? How do you find the qualified candidates? And it was basically, well, this guy's just very interested in the issue and calls me all the time. Well, that's not a good reason to put someone on the board. You know, that's not representative of our city. And that's what it broke my heart, because we couldn't even talk about her qualifications. It didn't matter her qualifications. Because she was female, it was like the conversation stopped. And that befuddled me, because who is more qualified than an attorney who already deals with some of these similar issues regarding property on another board? She wrote me the most, I'll be honest, she was very disheartened by this whole process. And she wrote me an email which basically said, I'm never qualified. I don't understand it. You know, people always jump over me. People always get the benefit of the doubt. And I've worked for everything I have, and I feel like I'm always at the end of the line. And I said, don't take this as a loss. This is a strategic retreat. We're going to win the battle. It's just going to take time.
And so that's the thing that I feel like is the biggest point here is, you know, you have to actively push for change, because, you know, and it takes, you know, to just say it bluntly, it takes a white guy to stand up for, you know, marginalized people in a lot of cases, because, you know, if there are never any people who with a diverse perspective at the table, then how are you ever going to be cognizant of, you know, what's impacting the community? How is brutality and policing affecting the community if you don't see it as a problem, because you only think in this myopic sort of sense of, well, it's not bothering me? And I think that's also the problems with conversations around race and equity is I don't see race. And I remember I was watching you kind of had this discussion.
Yeah,
the person was like, I can fight for people who are Black because I have some Black heritage or something, or either, you know, just I have Black friends. And I think
she said that she had Black heritage. Yeah.
Right. And I just feel like, you know, when you have these conversations around racism and anti-racism, it's like that's the kind of statement that is a racist statement, because of the fact that, you know, you're just discounting anybody else's lived experience, and you're diving right into, I understand how you feel. No, you don't. No, you don't. And so, you know, but the only person who can really speak for that experience is someone who is going through it. And I think that's really what adds to, you know, the national conversation on how we can move the needle forward. So
there needs to be more listening, more empathy, less talking. And it's always in reverse, in my opinion.
Right.
People come, I feel like there was a conclusion made here, and then everybody was working backward from that conclusion to justify it. Mm-hmm. When what we should have done, and what I strongly advocated for, was throwing out the entire pool of candidates, getting a new pool of candidates. It's like if you're police, you're Harper Woods police, right? If you got like 6 open positions and three people apply, you don't just take those 3 guys and say, well, those are the only people I got. No, you say we're going to throw that out and we're going to go find better people, more people, because I don't want to scrape the bottom of the barrel. Mm-hmm. And what frustrated me about this nomination was, besides my diversity push, I never was going to support this guy to begin with. He wrote a letter to the Detroit News saying that he believed that COVID-19 was a hoax perpetuated by Democrats to prevent the re-election of Donald Trump. And that to me smacks of bad judgment. You know, and then I got frustrated in the meeting. You watched it. I urge everyone to go at home, go to Sterling Heights website, watch our most recent.
Honestly, this was good viewing. I feel like this was good. You know, just when you watch local government, this is kind of like that moment where you're like, all right, this is how change actually happens. This is the debate.
Well, I mean, and he said, you know, and I said to someone else, like, this idea is not an opinion. COVID-19 is real. Wear a mask. social distance. You know, if I were on Zoom, right? Do this, right? And people are like, that's his opinion. No, that's bad judgment. And I was never going to support him because of his bad judgment. And someone else, one of my other council people said, well, you can't bring that in. You can't evaluate him based upon what he said. Look,
it's a public statement.
Yeah, he didn't say this at a backyard barbecue. He didn't say this, you know, cooking burgers with his buddies in his backyard. He wrote a letter to the editor of the Detroit News, and it was published. And so that to me says, that's like entering the public square and screaming. You want people to know your opinion. And the idea that I have to shut my eyes to that because it's not part of our city deliberation is insane. I posit, it's not the same thing, but I posit this. What if this guy was an unmitigated racist? What if he had gone into the public square and had said, I'm not saying he is, let's leave this guy to the side. What if one of our candidates was an unmitigated racist? And he said, I'm a racist. Would my council members then say, I can't bring in what he said outside of this meeting into the conversation? I'm not going to appoint that person to begin with because I can't trust their judgment.
For somebody like that. And so therefore it's like you should have these people held to the same level of scrutiny that, you know, elected officials, because you are a civil servant. You're a public servant when you're in these positions.
You're a volunteer, but you are doing business on behalf of the people. And I think that's a high standard. I don't think it's any guy off the street. Let's not, like, you know, the old joke about forming a jury. Go outside and to the bar and find 5 guys, you know. It doesn't work that way. You want people who are going to do their best job, who have sound judgment, who are going to represent all the people. And I'm sure before I learned about this COVID-19 thing, I said, maybe he'd be great. But after I learned about that, I said, there's no way I'm ever going to vote for this guy. And so, supposedly it's because I'm a racist, which is fascinating, whatever.
Right. So that definitely leads into like one of my questions here, you know, just talking about how pretty much there's been like a politicization about, you know, around wearing of masks. This is making it all political. There has to be, you know, just sort of I don't know. There's this weirdness about wearing masks and why you shouldn't wear them. And I know here in Harper Woods, there's actually been a recent write-in campaign to city council members asking us.
I get the same emails. It's an email spam campaign.
Have to wear masks. So, and it's just, I just feel like it's nonsense. And so what are your thoughts on this movement and why is it happening? And, you know, in some ways, why is this now a nationalism, you know, kind of issue where, you know, if you're feeling your patriotism is being questioned if you are wearing a mask, and you know a lot of people are citing, you know, losing their freedom, you know, for not complying. So what is this? What are your thoughts on this?
I think, like you said, it's nonsense. The idea, I have a mask, it's over there, I'm not gonna go grab it, but I have one handy.
Why am I looking for it? Like
all the time. I have one handy all the time. And what befuddles me on this whole thing is I went into a local place recently to eat, and there was a guy there who walked in without a mask. And I said, oh, you're not wearing a mask. And he says, no, I don't live in fear. And I'm like, that's fascinating. I don't think the virus cares if you're fearful or not. I don't think doing what's right is fearful. I think it's prudent. You know, my father has part of his lung removed because he's a lung cancer survivor. And I would rue the day if I ever got him sick. So I take this very seriously. And I think that people are mistaking abstinence with freedom. You know, the old joke was, you know, the freedom to throw a fist ends at my face, right? The freedom to throw a punch ends when it hits me, because now you're impacting me. And people seem to think that the actions they're taking aren't affecting anyone besides themselves. But that's not true. And I think that people have this very absurd version of freedom. Because if you turn it on their head, it's just like, I have the freedom to get you sick. I have the freedom to kill you, maybe, because this virus affects everyone differently. And I'm asserting that freedom because I don't like having a piece of cloth in front of my face, or I don't like having to sit at home. And really, I hate to joke about this, but it's like the fall of Rome. Like, people are sometimes too stupid for their own good. And these people are actively making us a pariah state. I mean, I like to travel. I travel all over the world.
Oh, yeah,
right now, I can't go anywhere.
No,
I wouldn't go anywhere anyways. I don't got nowhere to go. But if I wanted to leave, other countries are now afraid of us. They find us to be dangerous to their public health. And they've banned us because we are dangerous to their public health. And that to me is just absolutely silly. And just to tangent back to what we were talking about before, there is a member of the ZBA right now in my city who repeatedly and constantly refers to the virus as Kung Flu or the Wuhan virus. And I find this to be racist and offensive. And I think I might be the only one or one of a couple, because I asked our city attorney, how do we remove this guy? And he says that we really can't because that's kind of an opinion. It's not a fact.
But
so you can be
inflammatory language.
Sorry?
It's inflammatory language when you're describing something that way, when it has an actual scientific name. And you know, if you're like we said, like serving in these official capacities, whether it's volunteer or not, you know, just use the terms that are out there.
But according to our city attorney, who's also your city attorney, according to our city attorney, we can't remove him from the ZBA unless he takes, under state law, unless he takes an adverse action toward a petitioner based upon racism or something else like that. I can't remove him from the ZBA right now. And I'll tell you, I'm offended. I'm offended because I've been to China. I'm offended because I studied China. I'm offended just because no person is responsible for this. Right. And to put it on a people is to basically imply somehow that we should be fearful or angry or make fun of someone else. And I think, look, China's economy went into full recession. They had the first recession they've had in like 20 years. I don't think China is excited about this virus. No one is.
No, and that's the same, like you were saying, like you lived there, like I lived in China too. I lived in Wuhan. And so a lot of times when I share my memories or, you know, talk about Wuhan, people are like, oh my gosh. And it's just like, it could have originated really anywhere. You can't really get so xenophobic when it comes to, you know, this particular issue. And, you know, it like, I don't know, like, and then it just kind of, I think that's one of my last questions, talking about U.S.-China foreign policy. But
well, I mean, we could separate the people of China from the foreign policy of the Communist Party of China, which I do not support. I think is unilaterally aggressive, and I think is actually going to come to a bad end for them. But right now, in my opinion, and we can go back to this later, they are trying to assert themselves to distract from the problems they are having in their own economy. But we could go back to the Wuhan thing. I just think it's offensive. And the fact that I can't remove him for cause befuddles me. Because if he was saying the N-word, I think we could remove him. But because he's making comments toward Asian folks, you know, it's like the model minority myth, right? You can't really make fun of the model minority. They are somehow excluded from this, you know, and because I have a lot of friends who are Asian. I find it to be utterly and systematically offensive. And
that's kind of like the thing with, like, you know, certain ethnic groups, like especially when trying to, you know, be a part of, you know, the dominant culture, will kind of just like downplay like their level of offendedness, or, you know, and I think that kind of leads to this sense of, oh, nobody has a problem with it, and they
yeah, my friend who's Asian's cool with it, and my black neighbor is fine with it.
That's back to that dichotomy of racism versus anti-racism, and it's like, this is an anti-racist thing. If you are going to describe the coronavirus, don't call it the Kung Flu, and that's what the city needs to be committed to. It's like that needs to be reintroduced to this person if you can't remove them.
I believe me, it's utterly frustrating. You know, I can't believe that they let him get away with that. But I'm only one vote. I got to have 4 affirmative votes to do anything on my council, and the will to do it. Because just because you can do something, as you know, doesn't mean you're going to. You have to have the willingness to follow through with it. But it's frustrating to me. And we were talking about masks, and I had the most interesting experience today. I'm up at my cabin. You could tell from the beautiful greenery outside my house right now. And I'm about 30 minutes south.
Slightly better.
Yeah, or an hour south of Traverse City. And I went to the local breakfast place today to have an omelet, like I always do because I'm a simple person. And the owner there was affirmatively like, you can't enter my establishment if you don't have a mask. You can take it off when you sit at the table and eat. And we're all socially distanced. You want to use the restroom or pay, you got to put your mask back on. You want to walk outside, same thing. And I watched her turn someone away today. And I actually happened to comment to her. I said, ma'am, I'll just say, I respect what you're doing here. She goes, it's nothing about respect, it's about health. She goes, if they close me down again because cases spike out here, I'm going to lose my business. I'm desperate to stay open just to pay my bills and make my money and everything. And if I let cases get out of control up here, something does something stupid, it could cost all of us collectively money and time and effort. And I thought, you know what? That makes a heck of a lot of sense. She's literally not making a Democratic case or a Republican case. She's making a business case. But look, I want to stay open. And I respect that because she literally was saying, I want to stay open. I want to have the ability to serve my clients and make my money and be healthy. She's like, I want my health to be okay too. And I think we need to move away from this partisanship about masks. Because at the end of the day, the virus isn't partisan. The virus is not fearful. It's a virus. It's inanimate. It just kills. It's what it does. And until we realize that and approach it from that standpoint, that we're not going to control it, we have to just function. We're not going to make any change. And what's lacking, let's be frank, is leadership from the top. If the top displays leadership, every rung of the pyramid down tends to co-sign it and get in line. And until we get a leader in this country, not the current president, we're not going to have leadership on this type of behavior.
Right. And, like I said, the coronavirus, it's serious. I mean, my older sister, she has been diligent about wearing masks and, taking every precaution. And, she actually has been, she has the coronavirus now. And, this is something that's very serious now, like for myself and my family, and just kind of looking at, when it's so unknown, it's novel. It's, you think you're taking every precaution, you're washing your hands, you're wearing your and it's so unknown and so scary. We really do have to just, abide by the guidelines. I mean, what's the worst that could happen if you just, follow the rules? Well,
I mean, and it goes beyond that. These anti-mask petitions, which I get, which you get, they're all written by the same people. They all say the same thing. My mom was an OR nurse. She worked in the operating room, and she wore a mask almost her entire shift. 12 hours, she had a mask on. She had no ill effects. She did this for years because that was her job. The idea that you can't put one on to go into Aldi's to buy cornflakes befuddles me. It blows my mind. Like, I can't breathe in it. There are some people who can't for any number of reasons, but I would argue they're 1% of the population. 98% of the population needs to get over it and just decide, you know what, for public health, protect others, to protect myself, I'm going to do this. Because I guess I read in the Washington Post the other day, they seem to believe that the dose of virus you get when you get infected actually affects the outcome. And if you can cut down on that, you can have a mild case versus a hospitalization, oxygen, ventilator type case. So the life you may be saving is your own. I mean, it's just common sense. And sadly, one thing I've learned in politics is it's not as common as it used to be.
Right. And someone even said here, like we got a comment here, we have Harrisana Richards says hello. And,
hi, Harrisana.
She said, yes, we need white comrades to, clear that path and, use support and, not be silenced when it comes to using or delegating or uplifting the voices of less privileged. And then we have David here who said, if stores can choose, no shoes, no shirt, no service, then, they have a right to ask, where.
Right.
So yeah, that kind of, thanks for, your input. And, I do want to ask, shift a little bit more to policy, like foreign policy, like
sure.
International relations. let's see here. Your dissertation in graduate school was titled, Operation Third Force, the Red Menace, McCarthyism, and U.S. Central Activism in Activities in
Intelligence activities.
China
U.S.
during-
Central Intelligence activities
Okay.
in China during the war.
Right. And so, talking about political issues, influencing, just intelligence gathering, the international community is facing this global pandemic, and everybody is facing it. It's not something that, oh, this is only here, so a lot of countries are doing a better job at regulating and flattening the curves. And we kind of talked about this even before we went live. But, the Council on, Foreign Relations kind of released a report analyzing the evolution of, world order before COVID. And it's kind of offered a roadmap for U.S. foreign policy in the face of radical international uncertainty. So pretty much what they're saying is, foreign policy is shifting, and the United States may not be the one that's calling the shots anymore because, of just the way that things are going, and, the way that we kind of have turned our backs to the international community with regards to some of, just the spread of COVID and handling. And so what are your thoughts on diplomacy in the age of fear, hysteria, and inconsistent regulations? And what does radical international uncertainty mean to you?
I don't know. I mean, I'm a fan.
All right, that's all your answer.
I'm a fan of the Council on Foreign Relations, but they definitely have a viewpoint. They are not apolitical. They view that we need to be highly internationalist and need to effectuate change in the world by being a global leader. That's their viewpoint. Now, myself, I find it kind of fascinating. When I went to undergrad and I went to grad school, we talked a lot about, it was a bipolar world, communism versus free society. Then it was supposedly going to become a multipolar
polarity. Yeah.
Yeah, but it never became a multipolar world, really. And now we're kind of post-polar, whatever they're talking about now.
All right.
I really don't have an answer. I think that the President of the United States sets the foreign policy of the United States. And when you have a president who doesn't understand issues, like basic issues, the foreign community is unsure how to proceed. And it's clear that they've lost faith in Donald Trump. They utterly don't trust him to do anything. And I think that his incorrect statements about the world are somewhat fascinating to me. There is no requirement for any of our allies to pay into NATO. They're required to raise their defense budgets to protect us all. And we should call out our allies who haven't done this, because they live under the American security umbrella without investing in our shared security. So that's the thing you can call them out on. But the idea that you're just going to walk away from a security relationship that essentially won World War II, stabilized the world, protected against communism, and brought us to this current era, the word short-sighted doesn't do it justice, right? And I think that's why you see a lot of his public, people. John Bolton, for example, was his national security advisor. Bolton's a moron. I mean, he's an idiot, but he's a highly, he's a highly partisan, neoconservative who believes that intervention is the answer to everything. We should attack North Korea. We should attack China. We should attack so-and-so. And he couldn't even get along with Trump. Like, he literally had to leave because Trump was so zany that he couldn't even accomplish his strategic takeover of North Korea or whatever he was trying to do. And then we have a president who, more than that, literally wants to make nice with dictators and evil people. And and let's be honest, we make nice with dictators all the time if it suits our strategic interests. But what Trump is doing with dictators, I don't know what the interest is.
It's Russia not even personal interest. It's his own personal interest.
Right. So Russia is literally basically declared war on our democracy. They want to destabilize democratic institutions. And taking them at their word, they're lying. They're lying. And it's just fascinating to me. To go back to the comments on China earlier, I wrote this dissertation on China. I studied China as an undergrad and then as a graduate student. I find the current foreign policy situation to be very interesting. You know, China has grown up in the era of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. For a while there, they called it communism with Chinese characteristics, which was essentially a free market, you know, with a Communist Party atop it. And now they kind of moved away from that, and they're trying to create their own way government. But they've made a bargain since they suppressed the Tiananmen Square massacre. They've made a bargain with their people. We will give you peace and security in exchange for you not having a say in who runs this country. It's kind of an oligarchy slash, you know, communism slash like elites. You know, Lenin talked about the vanguard elite, and supposedly China moved away from that, but they still had this elite class of people who run the country and make all the decisions. And they've made this bargain. And when I was in China, I did oral interviews with several people who survived the re-education process and who survived the go down to the countryside movement. They were students who were during Mao, during the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. Mao closed the universities and sent scholars to live amongst the rural people to learn from them. And I met with Mrs. Xin, who had been sent down to the countryside, and she never got her college education because she was forced for 7 years to labor in the countryside. And you basically destroyed a whole generation of wealth that way, because these were the future scholars who never got an education, and no one got education those years because the universities were closed. And now the agreement is, if you give us peace and stability, we won't question who's in control of the government. Well, the key to peace and stability is a functioning market and an economy that's growing and bringing more and more wealth to regular people. I mean, I don't know what it is today, but when I first started studying China back in 2005, I think they said the average Chinese person in the countryside subsists on less than $1,000 American a year. That was the standard then. I'm sure that the living standard has increased since then because of all the wealth being created. But I just remember thinking about that. $1,000 is what you live on in a year in China if you're a nobody. And because, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats, they've had this generation of prosperity. But if the economy tanks, or the economy goes back and people do not feel like they're still rising, you're going to see a tremendous movement for something different. That's the agreement.
It's going to be civil unrest because, even in my trips to the countryside in China, you know, I was living in the city and I would visit places like Shanghai, Beijing, you know, but the countryside was always so rural. It was so removed from I remember I used to always get the question, which is like, where are you from? Or, you know, what country person are you? Literally. And, you know, there was a certain point where I was in such a, you know, just deep countryside where, you know, people weren't exposed to anything and they were just living on, you know, bare bones subsistence, that they were just like, what are you? You're not even a Chinese person, are you? And it was just very, very, you know, the world around them hadn't ever, you know, started moving towards any type of, you know, just the same type of development that was happening all over China, where people were being lifted out of poverty thanks to, you know, people like Mao Zedong. I mean, not Mao Zedong, but, you know, you have Deng Xiaoping. Exactly. Thank you. Thank you, fellow China expert. Deng Xiaoping and his policies on, you know, just economic revitalization. And, you know, so it really does point to the fact that China could stand to lose a lot as far as civil unrest and all of these new kind of freedoms and, you know, standards of living that have kind of been beneficial for everybody.
I mean, China's a fascinating place. I spent a month backpacking it. I spent a month going from Tianjin in the north all the way to Hong Kong in the south. Made a stop in Xi'an and really saw the different groups and people. You know, I went to, I think, 11 cities. It was fascinating. Took the overnight train. you know, which is still a way of soft sleeper.
The sleeper train, or was it one of those upright? Because I had like the cheap seats, and it was like you just.
No, I was in the soft sleeper cabin. I was comfortable.
Nice.
You know, but my then ex-girlfriend, her grandfather was 81, and he told me he took the train once from Hangzhou to Tianjin for vacation, hard seat. You know, like that was an accomplishment. The hard seats were hard. It just wood.
Oh yeah, it's just, and then so like when you're in
12-hour ride, you know,
it's like it was literally. I think mine was 12 hours too. And it's just like I forget where were we even going. I think we were going from from Wuhan to the south, and it was awful. It was agony.
I found China to be fascinating, and there's so much going on there. You know, I think that a lot of Americans have a misjudged sense of what China is,
right?
Because they don't understand that it is a gigantic place. Just traveling the country, it's bigger than the United States, including Alaska. It's just huge. The journeys you can take. I mean, I went to Xi'an. I was denied access to Tibet. They wouldn't let me in. But just going that way, it was like a 16-hour train ride. You know, we went out. It was like we just went into the sunset. You know, just doing that thing, chugging along at 100 miles an hour or whatever. You know, and you really can't see you can't grasp the size of it till you really do it. No. And then when you do that, you see there's so many different type of people there too. I mean, in Xi'an, which was the gateway of the Silk Road to China, there's a lot of Uyghurs who are. I actually
did my research. My undergraduate research thesis was on, you know, the Xinjiang Uyghur Zijiqi, or like the Uyghur Autonomous Region. So it's about the Muslim, so for everybody out there watching, the Muslim minority who live in, you know, Western China, and, you know, they're subject to the same sort of scrutiny that, you know, ethnic minorities, you know, the world over really are subject to, but it's
gotten worse. It's gotten worse since I was there. I mean, there's this rumor that there's always these Uyghur terrorists who are going to bomb something.
Right, and they have
it's always going around. They're going to cut your head off, you know. And that was because the Han Chinese are the predominant people. And it's fascinating. But when I was in the Uyghur Autonomous Region, Xi'an, you know, you see blonde-haired, blue-eyed Chinese people. They're clearly Asian, and they have blonde hair and blue eyes. And you see that this is a trade route that's immemorial. It's been around forever. And there have been people coming across this route for 2,000 years to trade goods. Marco Polo took this route.
Yeah,
and you really see that there's a mixture of people.
So like the steppes of Central Asia, that's a very, very diverse and rich region there because of so much trade and so much, you know, just interaction that happens. Like, you know, it was just interesting to look at just like the people range, you know, the spectrum really, you know, and it's really
you see all kinds of stuff. It's all kinds of colors. It's fascinating. What really fascinated me about this process and about my research and the things I've written on, and my undergraduate thesis was on the Qing dynasty's legal system, the last dynasty of China, for those at home. And what was fascinating about that was, you know, the Qing dynasty was actually what would be considered a Manchu-led dynasty. A minority group conquered China, conquered the Han Chinese, and ruled it for them, essentially.
Yeah, Qing dynasty ended in 1911, and they were, it was a long time.
Pu Yi was the last emperor of China, So it was the final dynasty. But what was fascinating about it to me was Manchu wasn't a race. They didn't have, we are Manchu and you are Han Chinese. Manchu was a state of being. Because there were two tribes, there's 12 tribes of the Manchu, right? And one of the tribes of the Manchu is Han Chinese. They had joined up with the Manchus in the 1600s as one of the Khan's clans, essentially. And they were considered to be Manchu because they rode horseback, they fired arrows, they attacked that way. They were a nomadic people, but they were ethnically no different than Han Chinese today. But when the Manchus ruled China, they were treated differently because they were Manchu. But there was no difference. So the idea of race and class in China, especially race, is a more new concept to them. Because you could be Manchu and Han Chinese at the same time, but you were different because Manchus were not allowed to intermix with Chinese people, even though they are physically and similarly everything different. It was kind of a fascinating place. But I really do think that we as a country misunderstand China quite a bit.
And that's the thing. I feel like it's up to us fellow sinologists who kind of get together and tell people like, well, and I feel like my biggest thing is always just telling people the difference between the culture in Japan, China, and, you know, Korea.
Yeah.
People are just like, oh, it's all the same. It's like, oh, no.
Well, I mean, and to go beyond that, I think people confuse the government with the people. The people are very different than their government. Their government isn't representative of the people. It's rubber stamp. And there's this fascinating series, you know, where people, there was a movie, I'm trying to think what the name of it was called, where a woman stood outside the Office of Appeals and tried to give them her appeal for her daughter who went missing for years and years. And it was the idea of just like one good official. We just have one good official. This predates the Qing dynasty. All we need is one good official who will solve the problems of the people.
But other than that, bureaucracy all the time.
Yeah, in a bureaucracy, yeah. And what I always thought fascinating about this process, this whole thing, was that the one good official, I mean, when you go around China, their education is rote. And you hear a lot about how Zhou Enlai saved this shrine. Or Zhou Enlai, the former, one of the high-level figures in who Mao never got rid of for whatever reason. You know, he's supposed to be this great benevolent figure who helped people. He also ran the anti-rightist campaign and killed a lot of communists, but whatever. But he's like Mao's like right-hand hangman. And he's like, Zhou Enlai saved the shrine. And Zhou Enlai was this. And he also was the patron of Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping was his like right-hand man. So basically, Zhou Enlai is this wonderful person, this fair official, but they don't see the true history of their own country. They see the history as what they're taught, which he's this wonderful person. They missed the part where during the 100 Flowers campaign, he sought out and killed threats to Mao's leadership. He led a wholesale bloodbath of communist scholars and people who were unhappy with the way Mao was taking the revolution. And I think that persists to this day. We gotta have one good official. If they just get what we're doing, we'll be okay.
And I think you hit a good point here talking about an idealized version of our own narrative. And I think America needs to realize that we have the same kind of thing where you can't just lump people with their government, because we have done a lot of this revisionist history, like, you know, the lost cause narrative, which leads to now the discussion that's ranging down in the South, where people are trying to remove Confederate monuments and people are removing statues that, you know, were not actually even erected immediately after the Civil War. This is not.
I don't care what they're erected; they should come down. But I mean, I don't know how you erect a statue.
That's the thing. Like, people's argument is, you know, oh, it's our history. It's not. It's not. That's something that was put up like decades and decades and decades after the Civil War. So therefore, and it's just like, even with these statues, like, you know, people see Hazen Pentagree's statue downtown. Tell me something about this man. Nobody can. And it's just like statues are going to be a reminder. Of course you do, because you went to, you know, London School of Economics and Columbia.
Right.
You know,
but no, I mean,
but no, I feel like other than absurd, you know, everyday people, that's not how they remember their history. And, you know, and it's just like for the most of us, you know, I think this is the biggest thing that I think we have to bring it back to folks, to remind them to use the empathy first, because, you know, you can't just look at China as a monolith and say, okay, well, the deregulation in the Wuhan wet markets, because wet markets exist all over China. I was seeing everywhere. And it was just all kinds of things that would be sold there.
Wet markets exist all over the world. They don't just exist in China. That too.
But so the point is, it's more, you know, just really, really, you know, paying attention to policy. And I think that really gets back to the initial discussion as we wrap up here. It's all about, you know, just being the person who has agency. And I know that's why I got involved in politics, is to be able to show folks that it's not just going to take, you know, those special amongst us. It's going to take all of us getting involved. And I think this is why it's important to continue to have protests. Is important. We just had a protest in Harper Woods yesterday. And, you know, although some of these things I can't talk about, you know, their investigations, but it's more, people need to be encouraged to hold their elected officials accountable and, to keep pushing us. I mean, me and you are council people, but I think we also have to realize we have to step up and represent the people and just do the uncomfortable work and do the work that is difficult to be able to really advocate for people and to be that example to show them like, hey, like you did picking out a young woman who was an exemplary.
Well, we'll see if she gets appointed still. It's still an open process.
Shoot, I'm gonna give you your advice you gave me, where it's just like, I'm like, this is so difficult sometimes, really fighting for the things that people don't even want to, they don't want to give, they want to give lip service, but they don't actually they don't walk the walk. And you were just like, it's hard, but you gotta do it. This is a part of the battle. And, I think that's really what I want folks to realize about, not only, just being involved and, just getting out there and making change, but, holding us elected officials accountable and, so because we have to fight for the next generation.
Well, I think there's two different kinds of elected officials. I thought this for years. There are people who get in office and then do the best they can not to make any decisions and just let the world fly by and just, kind of just keep under the radar. And you'll get elected that way. It's not hard. You just do the bare minimum. And there are other elected officials who want to create change. And if you create change, you're going to get the slings and arrows. But at the end of the day, I think that those politicians are the ones that go further because you're not actively avoiding the people. You're trying to serve them. And some folks might be mad at you for doing that. But others, they like someone who's out there hustling. Maybe they don't like all your ideas. But I like that you come to the table with ideas, that you're working every day to make their life better. And I think that when you structure that as the way you're going to approach government, I've always had the rule. I try to come to every council meeting with something I'm working on, some idea I have, something that I'm trying to change or I'm thinking about. And I use my time, we all have our reports in our meetings. I use my time to try to discuss the things that I'm trying to focus on. Because if you just explain to the people at home what you're trying to do, you will find support in places that you don't expect. Because the cranks and the idiots and other people, they come to the meeting. They'll come and complain. No one ever comes and says, you're doing a great job. I wanted to come by and tell you that. They come by and say, you're a jerk. You're an idiot. What are you doing? But those people aren't representative of all the people at home. And that's what we got to remember is that the people who come by and complain, they come by and complain for a reason. Everyone else who's satisfied, they're silent because they're satisfied. So you just got to keep working for them and not for the people who are unhappy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for being my guest here on Quick to Politic. Thank you for just always giving all of this advice that you probably need to start charging me for, because all this free advice, I'm just like, how do I fix this? So I think we're on the precipice of change, and sometimes we have to just kind of step up, and I think we as millennials in leadership, we're doing that. And, but I think it's also, there's a time for, I think society does have to reflect and reassess. So my closing words tonight are, just for folks to realize that, we have to be those agents of change. And, the struggle is 2020 is going to be the time where things change fundamentally, and we have to really push for it. So
I mean, change is hard. It isn't easy.
Mm-hmm.
If it was easy, someone would have come along and done it already.
Right. All right. And closing thoughts before we go ahead, and I do see that some folks have joined us, and somebody did say yes, millennials here for leadership. Somebody said stop complaining and do something. Absolutely. Thank you for watching out there in cyberspace. And
well, I hope they come find me on Twitter, where I like to give my opinion, MVR2111. And I hope they also find me on Instagram, everywhere else, and just follow, and we'll keep on doing what we're doing, right?
Right. So thank you very much for being my guest today, and thank you all out there in Facebook for watching. And it just stopped, and now I am stopping recording.
Thanks for having me.